Level 1. The candidate. Arriving at Scout Sniper School, you haul 60 pounds of equipment through a Carolina humidity that feels like breathing through a wet towel. The instructors are already watching, evaluating, and sorting the pool into categories you cannot see. Potential, marginal, waste of time. Nobody tells you where you stand. Nobody tells you anything except where to be and when to move. With an attrition rate of 70%, they mention the statistics on the first morning like a casual weather report. Just another fact about the environment you have chosen to endure. 7 out of 10 candidates will be gone before the end. Some will quit, and some will be cut. Others will simply break in ways that aren't immediately visible but become glaringly obvious over time. Your first week focuses entirely on stalking. There's no shooting and no ballistics. It is purely about moving across terrain unseen. Low crawling through fields, you evade instructors scanning the grass with binoculars, knowing that if they spot you, the exercise starts over. You build ghillie suits from burlap and local vegetation, transforming yourself into something decidedly non-human, something that bleeds into the mud, the grass, and the shadows between trees. You learn to move inches per hour. Patience, you discover, is a weapon far more valuable than any rifle. Ultimately, you realize a sniper's greatest skill isn't marksmanship, it is invisibility. All-around candidates wash out in clusters. One quits after a night exercise leaves him hypothermic and questioning his life choices, while 2 others are cut for safety violations on the range. Another simply doesn't show up for formation. By morning, his bunk is stripped, his gear returned, his decision made in the quiet of the dark. Yet you stay. It is not because you are the best, but because you refuse to imagine leaving. Every crawl through mud that seeps into places it shouldn't, every hour of stillness while insects explore your motionless face, every failure that sends you back to the starting line, all of it is filed away where it cannot touch your resolve. This is what you want. This is who you are becoming. The shooting comes later, proving far more difficult than anticipated. You know rifles. Having grown up hunting, you can put rounds on target at distances that impress civilians. However, precision shooting at 1,000 yards is an entirely different discipline. Wind doesn't just push the bullet, it curves it in patterns that change second by second as the round moves through pockets of air with varying temperatures and densities. Gravity drops the projectile in parabolas that require strict calculation, not estimation. The fundamentals you thought you had mastered are merely the foundation you are still building. The final exercise breaks those who survived everything else. It entails 4 days in the field with minimal supplies, completing stalks under evaluation, taking scored shots under immense pressure, and operating on sleep measured in minutes. Eventually, your body stops distinguishing between mud and skin, and your mind simplifies to the next task and nothing beyond it. Instructors watch for mental collapse just as closely as physical failure. Some candidates perform flawlessly until an internal governor snaps under the accumulated stress. They are gone immediately, not punished, but recognized as unsuited. The profession demands a specific psychology that cannot be taught, only revealed. You survive because you discover something vital about yourself. Your mind quiets under pressure rather than racing. The chaos simplifies rather than compounds. It isn't courage exactly, it is simply how you are wired. Graduating in the bottom third of your class, your performance is neither spectacular nor shameful. It is competent. Receiving your designation and your orders, you ship out to a team that needs bodies more than it needs excellence. Level 2, the spotter. Led by a staff sergeant named Reyes, a man with 4 deployments and eyes that never quite focus on the present, you navigate your new reality. He has killed more people than you have ever met. He carries that weight in ways that only become visible after months of proximity. The slight hesitation before entering rooms, the strategic positioning at restaurants to watch every exit, and the night terrors he doesn't discuss but everyone hears through the thin barracks walls. As the junior member, your job is to spot. While the shooter pulls the trigger, the spotter manages everything else. range estimation, wind calls, target identification, and documentation. You serve as the shooter's external brain, by processing environmental data so he can focus entirely on breath control and the precise muscle memory required to put rounds on target. Your first deployment is to a country you aren't supposed to name, executing operations that officially do not happen. The rules of engagement are convoluted and change weekly. Wearing no uniforms, the enemy blends in seamlessly until the exact moment they strike. You learn to read threats in a stranger's gait, the positioning of their hands, and the subtle fractures in normalcy just before violence erupts. Your first kill as a spotter involves a man shouldering an RPG. Reyes takes the shot from 800 meters while you call the wind, confirm the target, and watch through your scope as the round impacts before the sound arrives. One moment, the man is aiming at a convoy. The next, he is falling. The biological system sustaining his life simply shutting down. Expecting a profound reaction, triumph perhaps, or horror, you instead feel a wave of professional satisfaction, identical to the emotion following any job executed correctly. The shot was clean, the target was valid, the outcome was successful. Filing the man's face away in a mental vault, you pivot to the next task. Reyes watches you afterward, probing for cracks. Having seen new spotters break in this exact moment when the abstract suddenly becomes agonizingly concrete, he doesn't find what he's looking for. That might be a good thing, or it might be deeply concerning. You choose not to ask. Over the coming months, the environment teaches you what the schoolhouse could not. You learn to read local atmospherics, noting how morning air moves differently than afternoon air across specific topography. You improvise firing positions when the perfect hide site doesn't exist. Swallowing your frustration, you disengage when a shot isn't viable, accepting that patience outweighs body counts. You adapt to the rhythm of the deployment cycle, the blinding intensity of operations followed by the hollow emptiness of downtime in secure zones. Studying Reyes, you memorize his patterns, his tells, and his preferences. You learn when he requires input and when he demands absolute silence. Gradually, you become an extension of him, which is exactly what the duty requires. Your individual identity is entirely subsumed by the team. Level 3. The shooter. After his 5th deployment, Reyes rotates home to take a training command position. Everyone knows it is a quiet relocation to manage the drinking that has become too visible and a marriage that is already fractured. Attending his farewell party, you navigate the complex emotions military transitions demand: gratitude, relief, and grief for the version of him that might have existed without all those ghosts behind his eyes. His replacement, a new staff sergeant from a different unit, is technically your senior but practically dependent on your institutional knowledge. Without a word spoken, the power dynamic inverts. You become the primary shooter because it is what the team needs, and rank frequently accommodates necessity in small units operating far from oversight. Your first shot as the primary is anticlimactic, a confirmed hostile at 600 meters. With steady wind and perfect conditions, the mechanics execute exactly as trained. Breath, pause, squeeze, confirm, move. It is the hard shots that teach you who you have become. Intelligence identifies a Valley compound holding 3 American aid workers captured 2 weeks prior. The cell holding them has already uploaded 1 execution video. The window for intervention is impossibly small, the approach rugged, and the stakes absolute. You establish a hide 1,400 meters out, a distance further than you have ever engaged in combat. The wind is volatile, shifting directions every few minutes as valley thermals wreak havoc on the air currents. Your new spotter calls out changing numbers, offering his best guess against physics that refuses to cooperate. Waiting for hours, you peer through high-powered glass that renders the compound eerily intimate despite the distance. You memorize the guards' patrol patterns. Briefly, the hostages appear in a window, faces you studied in briefing photos, alive for now, but likely not for long. The opportunity arrives at sunset. The necessary target halts at a predictable position just long enough. Applying elevation and windage corrections based partly on hard calculation and partly on sheer instinct, you blend math and art in a way you could never articulate. The trigger breaks cleanly. The round flies true. The guard drops, initiating the assault. 20 minutes later, with the hostages secured on outbound helicopters and the sun fully vanished, you begin breaking down your position. 3 confirmed saves. 3 people will continue breathing because of the math you did in the dark. This feels fundamentally different from the others. The moral weight shifts. On level 4, the instructor. Returning to the institution that forged you, you now stand where your evaluators once stood, judging candidates who look exactly as you did 8 years ago. The cycle continues. The institution persists, entirely indifferent to the individual. Teaching exposes the gaps in your own mastery. You knew how certain techniques worked, but explaining them demands a deeper analysis of the why, the core principles beneath the procedures. By learning to manufacture shooters, you inadvertently become a better one. Your candidates struggle deeply with the same fundamentals that once plagued you: trigger control, breath management, and the agonizing mental discipline required to wait for hours only to execute perfectly in a fraction of a second. Watching them break against the curriculum, you learn to predict who will survive. It is never the physically strongest or the naturally gifted. It is the candidates who treat failure as data rather than a verdict. They adjust in advance rather than repeating errors while praying for different results. You develop a reputation for harsh assessments paired with flawless fairness. Your criticism is surgical, targeted at specific mechanical deficiencies rather than general disparagement. Your standards are non-negotiable. More importantly, graduates from your cycle perform measurably better in initial deployments, which remains the only metric of value. Yet teaching physically distances you from the craft. You are building the weapon, not wielding it. The skills you maintain on manicured ranges feel hollow compared to those tested in active operations. The edge begins to dull. Not in mechanical technique, but in something far less tangible. The acute readiness for violence that combat demands degrades into theoretical knowledge. You miss it. It is an uncomfortable, undeniable truth. You miss the stripped-down clarity of a combat deployment. Training saves lives, but it is bogged down by repetition and administrative paperwork. When the opportunity arises for one final deployment, you seize it. Level 5. The team leader. By now, the unit feels entirely alien. Surrounded by younger faces sharing cultural touchstones you don't recognize, and utilizing technology that didn't exist when you enlisted, you stick out. They affectionately call you Old Man. You aren't truly old yet, but your body begs to differ. Your knees predict changes in barometric pressure. Your lower back holds the memory of every agonizing hour spent contorted in the dirt. Recovery stretches from days into weeks. But you lead because operational experience compounds. You have witnessed what works and what gets people killed. Having watched brilliant shooters make catastrophic decisions under stress, and mediocre shooters make life-saving decisions through sheer discipline, you know exactly which tactical instincts to trust and which to aggressively override. Your team deploys to a conflict that is technically not a war, executing operations that officially do not happen, and producing results that will never be formally acknowledged. The targets are higher value. The intelligence is sharper. Taking a shot at 1,700 meters, you cement your legacy. The angle was atrocious, the wind erratic, and the time pressure suffocating. Moving between vehicles, the target was visible in a window measured in literal seconds. You took the shot because losing the target was unacceptable, and you made it because missing was unthinkable. The team immortalizes that moment, slightly inflating the distance and difficulty with every retelling. You never correct the exaggerations because unit morale is a tactical asset, but privately you acknowledge the heavy tax luck played in the ballistics. The shot that truly matters, however, is the one nobody talks about: a mistake. A target was identified, engaged, and neutralized. The intelligence was fatally flawed, your shot was mechanically perfect, and the outcome was a dead civilian in the wrong place at the wrong time. In the sanitized bureaucracy of after-action reports, it is collateral damage. In the quiet honesty of your own mind, it is murder. Sleep evades you for months. The faces you filed away begin to surface, hostile and civilian alike, but this specific face refuses to be buried. It asks questions that your tactical justifications cannot answer. Although the rules of engagement and the internal review board clear you of wrongdoing, the face does not. You learn to carry that specific crushing weight because the alternative is to become something monstrous. Soldiers who feel absolutely nothing terrify you far more than soldiers who feel everything. Level 6. The Master Unofficial and bestowed by peers rather than brass, the title means you have survived long enough to become a statistical anomaly, an operator who hasn't broken physically, burned out psychologically, or simply fallen on the wrong side of the mathematics of incoming fire. Younger operators ask you questions they would never dare ask their formal instructors, knowing you possess ghosts their teachers have never seen. Rotating between deployments and development, you test next-generation systems, optics that calculate ballistics autonomously, rifles that auto-adjust for atmospheric shifts, and technology promising to eradicate human variables. But you understand a truth the engineers ignore. Those human variables are the exact genesis of success. Algorithms cannot make moral judgment calls. Your final deployment is simultaneously your easiest and your hardest. It is easy because the operations are entirely routine. It is hard because the finality of it taints everything. Observing your team with a hyper-awareness of the impending end, you pause to appreciate shots that would have been entirely unremarkable a decade ago. Your final shot is exactly that: unremarkable. A confirmed hostile at medium distance, standard atmospheric conditions, executed with quiet professionalism. You don't even realize it was your last round until you are sitting on the transport plane heading home. Only then does the absolute certainty settle in. You will never do this again. 22 years, hundreds of operations, a body count you abandoned long ago because keeping tally began to feel perverse. What you carry home cannot be left on the tarmac. You carry the faces, the auditory phantom of incoming fire, and the smell of cordite and copper that hijacks your memory while standing in a suburban grocery store. The hypervigilance that kept you breathing in a combat zone serves absolutely no purpose here, but you also carry this: the people walking the earth because you were exceptionally skilled at a terrible craft. The hostages breathing fresh air, the convoys that arrived safely, the ambushes that never materialized. The moral mathematics will never perfectly balance, but perhaps they aren't supposed to. You did exactly what your country asked of you. The scope goes into its case, relegated to a closet you will rarely open. The physical skills remain intact, slowly dulling through disuse, available if the world ever demands them again, but desperately hoping it won't. You cannot unlearn what you know. You survive it the only way you know how. One shot at a time, one breath at a time. The discipline holds right up to the very end.